Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Dragon Transcended by Talia Beckett, narrated by Allyson Voller. Chapter 1. Magic flowed through me, moving from my connection to the ancestors to all the metal around me. I was sitting in the middle of an armory. After over 2 weeks of relative peace and no sign of the demon again, I had a surplus of magic, and this time I wasn't going to waste a single bit. When Jace had given me all the possible weaponry and armor for the dragons coming into the city, and I still had plenty of magic left, Jace and I had talked to the blacksmith and asked him to fashion me objects that acted as batteries, for want of a better word, and I now had a lot of them. One of the biggest reasons that I had lost Ben to the demon was that I had been running low on magic and couldn't just plow my way through his army to get to Ben's side. I didn't ever want that to be the case again. It had taken a few days to find a good material that I could activate and charge, and that was also light and had a high storage capacity. Sitting in a stack beside me were ingots of some alloy of metal I had never heard of and couldn't pronounce or spell. It was already about half full of magic, and I had just put in a request with Jace for some more. Most of the time I was training throughout the day and teaching the dragons on the army base part of Dataris, which used a lot of my personal magic. But I was filling the charge bricks with the magic from the Isle of the Ancestors whenever I had the chance. Something about it appeared to be more potent. Perhaps because I was drawing it from some very powerful ancestors of mine. I had just drained the connection a significant amount, and myself a little as well, when I was thinking it was enough for the day. Douglas, like a veritable mind reader, came in to join me.
"The fresh recruits have arrived. The 20 we picked from the second batch of applicants."
Douglas folded his arms across his chest and leaned against the door jamb. "How do they look?" I noticed his usual sunny disposition was gone. Douglas was one of the few humans I liked a lot and got along well with.
"Like raw recruits who don't know their ass from their elbow. You're going to have your work cut out for you with this batch."
"Even more so you, then," I grinned as I got up. Only a week before, when the base had officially been finished, and I had all the paperwork that the U.S. government wanted in order to make it clear who owned it, Douglas had finally made his plans official. He was an official citizen of Dataris, the first human to be a member of the Dragon Nation, and in charge of all the humans in our armies. Since then, we had begun taking in recruits from the many applicants we had. Jace and Douglas were working together to vet them and make sure they were suitable. The dragon way of life didn't include money, but came with the perks of being in a nation that could speed heal you, feed you, and make sure you didn't want for anything again. Some people who had applied had turned their attention elsewhere when they realized that joining our army was a sort of lifetime deal and didn't come with any pay. But it did come with everything else they needed, and for life. So I considered it a win anyway. And as evidenced by the fact we were taking on our second set of 20 people already, I wasn't the only one. I followed Douglas out to the yard where all of them were waiting. Some of them had been there a while, and they appeared bored, at least until they noticed us. They had already grouped up for the most part, introducing themselves to each other, and all of them had some kind of luggage with them. There was a mix of men and women, although the group was predominantly male, and they had come from all over the world, not just the U.S. All of them had been interviewed and had submitted a medical report, among other things, and it was clear that they were all in good shape. For a few seconds, I didn't know what to say or do. The first batch of 20 had arrived so soon after Ben had been captured that I'd barely taken in that they were there and hadn't been able to greet them until they were ready for training. I'd opted to change that going forward, but more to keep myself occupied than anything else. "Hello," I said as I stepped closer, wanting to get this over and done with after all. "For those of you who don't yet know who I am, I'm Scarlet, Queen of the Dragon Nation and leader of the army. You're officially my citizens now, and like the rest of us, you'll train to help us in battle fighting the great demon and keeping this planet safe." I paused as they all cheered, and several of them wandered closer, giving them a moment and processing what else I wanted to say. "The dragon race considers their purpose on this planet to start and end with protecting it and all life on it. That now goes for all of you as well. You will treat every living creature with respect, from your fellow humans to the dragons, and as much as possible the animals that share this planet with us as well. We won't kill needlessly, and we won't waste our time with petty squabbles." This didn't meet with the same amount of enthusiasm. It was serious business. "If you can show that you have what it takes to be a member of this nation, you will gain all the benefits that come with our race. You will be looked after. Your health will be considered as important as our own, physical, mental, and emotional, and you will even get to play with some of our magical artifacts." I lifted my sword and shield and gained a few more cheers. With nothing more to say, I motioned for Douglas to step in and take over. He was more than ready, and he continued the introductions, letting them know they would answer to him and Jace, and telling them where they would sleep. There were a lot of towers in the Dataris half of the joint army base, but also one very large barracks with multiple floors. The elders of Dataris had only agreed to let the humans live here temporarily, and I didn't mind keeping a little separation between the races for now, although Douglas had earned himself a little trust and was regularly brought into the city. It was still hard for him, however. The magic that cloaked the city also disoriented humans who got too close, and he still needed escorting into the city, despite the dozens of times he'd walked across its physical boundary. I didn't know how it felt for any non-dragon, and appreciated that he was so willing to go back and forth. Not to mention that he had been the best commander for the human part of my military that I could have hoped for. He'd volunteered to serve me when he had been asked to spy on me, and decided he couldn't go behind my back like that. Now that I had him working with me and training soldiers, I also hoped to ease the alliance I had with the U.S. Army a little, not because the soldiers had been a problem, but because someone higher up wanted to know more than I wanted to share. Thankfully, other than a few ruffled feathers at the soldiers who also wanted to join Douglas, we hadn't encountered any great issues. We didn't take all the soldiers on the base at once, rather over several months, so we wouldn't leave them without a team of their own. It was the only way to get the general not to hate us and the U.S. Army to accept them leaving without considering them deserters. I'd been very surprised by how many had wanted to follow in their captain's footsteps. He said it was all because of the way the dragons worked as a team with the soldiers and fought so hard to protect them and the corrupted humans. Seeing me and the other dragons drain our magic to exhaustion to heal and fight the taint they all faced made them want to be on our side. That goodwill was spreading out into what people thought of us. For a while it appeared that the human race was going to turn on us, but they had come around when they had seen dragons almost literally sucking the corruption out of all the people who had been taken and controlled by the demon. When loved ones returned to families and friends and spoke of waking up to us, making them better, and healing them, or of other situations where we'd been seen as clear defenders of humanity, it went a long way towards softening the hard race divide we'd first encountered. Of course, we couldn't save everyone. But the demon had now been seen enough on TV and social media that the anger was directed at him and not at us. In fact, I had more and more people requesting to interview me, wanting to make movies about me, and generally wanting to be involved in defeating the enemy. It was strange, but in a few days, I was going to meet with some of the smartest people in the world and some of the richest business owners to talk about the problem and see if they could help. It was as if the world's resources had opened to me. If it hadn't been for Rayo guiding me in that regard, I would be terrified of it and have no clue how to navigate it. Thankfully, he had promised to help me and make sure I was getting a good deal for the dragon world out of it too, as well as making progress in the fight against the demon. Although my father had put me in a strange position for my early life, and I'd often thought he hadn't loved me, now that I had to actually play the role of queen and interact with the human world, I could see everything he had put in place around me to safeguard and protect me. Because he'd involved Anthony, Rayo, and others in his plan, he'd left me with a legacy of sorts. I had the people I needed, with their powers and experience, but I also intrinsically knew a lot about the world that I wouldn't have had I stayed hidden in one of the dragon settlements throughout my early years. Douglas, finishing his part of the introduction with the new recruits, snapped me back to reality. They were told to drop everything they'd brought with them for the next part of the tour. Dataris. This was my favorite part.
Come on, then. I know you've all been wanting to see this, so form up in pairs, nice orderly line, and if you're worried as we go over the edge, hold on to the person next to you and know it will all be over soon.
Douglas grinned, and I knew he'd enjoy this part. I didn't blame him. I loved an element of introducing everyone to Dataris proper as well. It just wasn't the same part. Douglas loved their abject terror at being asked to step off what appeared to be a massive cliff, and I loved the wonder when they could finally see all of Dataris with its array of colors of flying dragons and massive towers. We led the troop, walking beside each other as we moved to the small opening at the back of the army camp that led to our city now. We had moved the road so it diverted around the back of the army base, and the road from Dataris proper ran through the army camp and out one side. It made it easy to lead our new squad to the cliff edge. Despite the architectural changes, it still appeared as if the army base ended before the city appeared, a large drop down to the sea. As soon as we reached it, we stopped on the edge. Already the line behind us looked uncomfortable. The magic from the barrier made them want to get away from the edge and increased the anxiety and unease they felt. It's going to feel scary. More than normal for any of you. That's how the city is designed. How we've been able to hide from all of you for so long. But you're going to have to get past that. Douglas here assures me that it gets easier each time you do this, though it never goes away entirely. I grinned, noticing that Douglas was practically bouncing with delight.
All right, first 2 soldiers, step up, and then off the cliff between Her Highness and me.
The 2 soldiers looked at each other and stepped a little closer, and then looked at each other again. They then looked down and at each other again. Douglas hid his mirth as best he could now, but it was clear that he was enjoying this from the light in his eyes. The soldiers still didn't do as he instructed.
Soldiers, is there a reason you're not carrying out the commands you've been given?
No, sir, the left one nearest him replied.
Then execute the orders, soldier. Get on with it.
As they finally stepped forward, I shifted slightly, moving just enough that I was half in Dataris with them and holding myself right over the barrier with 1 foot in and 1 foot out. They gasped, and so did everyone behind them, although for different reasons. Instead of falling, as their eyes and anxiety were trying to suggest, They stepped forward and through the barrier into Dataris. They paused, checking the ground under their feet, and then looked back and forward. They could see the rest of the recruits, but the others couldn't see them. I was half in and half out, so I could look one way and peer inside the city, and look the other way, and it looked as if I were standing over the cliff edge. To the recruits, I would look cut in half.
"Okay, you two, go a bit further so there's space for the others."
They both nodded. Their fears gone now, they were inside the city. I motioned for Douglas to send in the next pair, and he gave the order. They were still all scared and took a moment to come in, but they did it, emboldened by those who had gone before them, and seeing me half gone as well. It was a slight disadvantage to the first two, but there was no other way to do it, and I focused on their reactions on entering, all of them dropping their jaws or otherwise reacting with awe to seeing the city. With dragons flying around the city, they also got a great example of how powerful we could be and how many more of us there were than had been seen in battle. It was eye-opening and reminded me of the first time I had come into the city. It had been an experience. Seeing others enter the city helped me not to forget the wonder. As soon as all the recruits had made it, Douglas followed them, but I saw him take a moment himself as the barrier worked its magic to try to deter him as well. Okay, now begins the main tour. You're not going all the way through the city, but we'll show you some of it. Get some food, and you can meet some more of the dragons you'll be fighting beside. I motioned for them to follow me, drawing their attention from Douglas and giving him a moment to overcome his own flash of fear unobserved. Douglas had been there for me countless times. It was the least I could do to distract them and give him a moment. And helping these recruits had been the distraction I needed. I might miss Ben and be worried about him, but I had a nation to run and people to protect. Chapter 2. When Douglas got to my side again, we led the recruits deeper into Dataris, taking the road down to the small parking lot and near the base of some of the towers. Dragons flew around and overhead the whole time, but I could see Flick, Narrator, and some of the others working their way down to us. At first, I had found it difficult to tell the dragons apart, seeing those of the same color as pretty much the same. But over time, I had learned to spot the differences in size, build, and even the way they flew. It had helped me in battle several times, and it gave me a heads up now about who was incoming. The recruits continued to look around in awe, and the neat line of them slowly spread out as some walked faster than others. I noticed them pointing out the dragons as I stopped and turned to them again. Flick flew across my field of vision behind the recruits.
"Ready for us to join you?"
I gave him a brief nod that only he noticed. Within a couple of seconds, he had come back around me. He flew straight toward the group, down low and fast. It was Flick through and through, and he had more than enough skill to pull up at the very last moment, transform, and drop down beside me in his human form. He'd done something similar on my first visit to the city. The recruits recoiled, likely afraid of being trampled or attacked until Flick landed. Douglas chuckled, no doubt enjoying their fear once more. "This is Flick. He's one of my honor guards and fights alongside me in battle." As soon as I finished speaking, Narrator flew over their heads, this time swooping low across them from behind, and landing on my other side with a twist and a flourish. And Narrator, my partner, and another of my honor guards. He's never far from my side. It was the first time I'd publicly admitted that Narrator and I were involved with each other, but no one blinked or batted an eyelid. I was seen with Narrator everywhere, and I had been since the beginning. No one found it surprising. These dragons will fight beside you, help protect you, and need your help in battle. They'll fly around you like this in the heat of a fight, getting to where they're needed, transforming fast from one form to another, and you'll need to be used to it." As more and more dragons flew in and landed, each one getting close to the recruits and simulating the battle experience as best they could, the recruits reacted less and less and tried to hold still and steady. This had been billed as a tour of the city, but it was the beginning of their training. My mother landed as well, coming in and flying past several times. They gasped at seeing her red scales, the only other red dragon in the city besides me. When she transformed and landed near me, and right in front of all of them, she was wearing battle armor and carrying a shield and weapon of her own. She looked every bit the powerful warrior. Immediately, one of the recruits saluted her, and the others followed suit. "This is my mother Sierra. Of all of us, she has the most experience fighting the enemy, and has been doing so longer than I've been alive. If she tells you what to do and how to do it, you do it without question. Is that clear?" I asked. There was a chorus of, "Yes, Your Highness," and then it went perfectly quiet. One final dragon flew down after that. Alatos. He flew majestically, slower, more controlled, in a sweeping pattern over their heads before coming down on my right-hand side. I didn't flinch as he chose the last possible moment to change, and his wings came so close to me that they ruffled my hair before he stood beside me. There were more gasps as he landed and changed form, showing himself also decked out in his battle gear. "And this is Alatos. He's the captain of the honor guard and responsible for my life, and making sure that none of you put me in more danger than I put myself." There were chuckles at this part as I paused. "If he gives you an order, you also obey without question." There were more salutes as I stepped back and let Alatos take over. "You're all far younger than any dragon is when they take up their arms and head into battle, with a few exceptions, of course." Alatos glanced at me before carrying on. "But you can still be useful, and it's your planet and your people at stake here. Your friends and your families. Let me start by telling you that you all have my respect. You have volunteered to aid in this fight when many others would cower and run." I zoned out as I tried to think of what Ben would have made of this. He wouldn't have been so excited about it, but he'd have appreciated them as well. He didn't appear to be as comfortable in the human world as Jace or Anthony had been, but he also appreciated humanity. Thinking of Ben made me wish to be somewhere else. I wasn't involved in any other part of this tour, and that was deliberate, so that I could go and get on with work if I needed to. Not that I had as much as I would want to keep my mind occupied at this particular moment. Alatos told the raw soldiers the rules of the city, making sure they understood that this was a city of cooperation and kindness, and that they would be expected to take their part in our society as well. They carried on with the tour and left many of us behind. Narrator's Flick and my mother stuck close to me. "Well, that was something your father would have loved to see," my mother said as soon as they were out of earshot. "He thought humans were such an interesting race, so much capacity for so many things, worth protecting, and he hoped that one day he would see us combine into one allied force." It was rare for Mom to talk about my father, and it made me pause as well. I gave her a hug from the side, appreciating knowing that. It made me feel better to know that I had walked our nation toward his vision without necessarily intending to. But even that made me long for Ben. Trying to put him out of my head wasn't working today. I made excuses about wanting to go check on some other element of the city and flew off before any of them could ask me not to. After all this, I needed a moment to myself. Without waiting for any response, I flew up to the library and went toward the upper room where Ben had been spending a lot of his time. I had a growing army and plenty of magic stored up. The only way I was going to feel better was to find Ben and bring him home. Now and then I reminded myself that he could be dead, but I didn't want to think about that possibility. I didn't want to consider not getting to him in time, or that I'd left him to die the first time I had flown away. But it had haunted my dreams since. I went over to the table where all his notes were still strewn. If he'd had an order to them at one point, there wasn't one now. I had been through them all several times, trying to figure out where the artifact pieces might be, where the demon might be hiding, and where else I could look for him. It wasn't easy. And I'd already been through it all, but that didn't stop me from picking up a piece of paper with my notes on it to look it all over again. There had to be something I was missing, some piece of information that would help. I wasn't going to give up on him. He hadn't given up on translating Anthony's journal. Now it was up to me to read the whole thing again and again. I had to show the same dedication to finding Ben and these artifacts. As I reached for the next piece of paper, I heard a creak on the stairs. I looked over to see Narrator joining me. Dressed in his usual scruffy clothes, massive boots, and long leather jacket, he didn't look as if he belonged in a library, especially one this old and delicate. I smiled when I saw him, however.
"Thought I would find you here. You still looking for more clues?"
he asked as he pulled out the chair nearest to me and sat. I didn't reply, but let him take the piece of paper I had. It wasn't scrawled with notes like the others, but held a transcription of the poem Anthony had found about the artifact pieces. Several times I had considered the strategy of going after the rest of the pieces as the best way to draw the demon out again and hope that he led me back to Ben or brought a corrupted version of him to the fight. Of course, the longer Ben was corrupted, the worse his chances of survival would be. The corruption slowly killed the person infected until nothing was left but the demon that had taken it. It explained the shadow catchers. They were something that had nothing left of whatever they had once been. It made me shudder to think about it, but I didn't speak, waiting for Narrator to do so.
"There's what, 5 of these left to find?"
he asked after a moment. I think so. Ben thinks we found 4 of the ones nearby and 1 from the beach, although the demon still has that last one somewhere. We took the other 3 from him, and we managed to get 1 of them first ourselves.
"That's not a very high rate of getting to them first."
He pushed the piece of paper closer to me. We got to several of them first, but because of Griffin, the demon got there not long after us and took them, or fought us off. I folded my arms across my chest, knowing that was one of the reasons we had lost so many people. They had been killed by the demon because Griffin had kept leaking information. The device he had used was still in my care. We had considered trying to use it several times, but Alatos had advised against us doing so in Dataras. It wasn't the place for experimenting with something so dangerous and unpredictable.
"What if we guess where one might be and do a flyby? There's a growing number of us who can detect the artifacts and charge them, and some of these clues are very different from the others. I'm pretty sure some of these must be fairly obvious. The highest peak has got to be something people know about."
Narrator looked at me as if I might have some idea, and it took me a couple of seconds to grasp that he probably had no idea himself. Dragons weren't taught that much about the human world and Earth in general because they didn't need to leave their cities, or hadn't. It was all changing now, But Neritos hadn't been given the same education as me. Again, I found myself grateful that my father had given me the best of both worlds.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?